Ancient army of warriors has been quietly conquering the world. Wherever small battalions of China's famous terracotta warriors are exhibited, they win over a new legion.
In 2025, artificial intelligence scanned the Terracotta Army, and what it found stopped historians cold. Hidden inside thousands of clay faces were details no human eye had ever caught. Details that don't just add to the story of ancient China. They rewrite it. But to understand what the AI discovered, you have to go back. Back to a cracked field, a broken shovel, and one moment that changed archaeology forever. It is early spring, 1974. The farmlands outside the city of Xi'an in northern China are bone dry. A drought has been slowly killing the region for months. A small group of farmers decide to dig a new well. One of them is named Yang Jifa. He digs down about 15 feet through pale, dusty clay. Then his shovel hits something hard. He thinks it's old roof tile. Broken pottery, maybe. Then a human-sized clay head rolls out of the pit. More pieces follow. A torso. Fragments of armor. Bronze arrowheads catching the morning light. Yang Jifa and the other farmers stack the pieces at the edge of the field. Some of the arrowheads are collected to sell for a few coins. The discovery nearly ends there. But a local cultural official named Jiao Nen hears rumors of strange statues near the well. He drives out, sees the figures, and immediately understands that something extraordinary has been found. He begins collecting every fragment and contacts the Provincial Archaeological Institute. Within months, excavation teams arrive. Within years, China builds an entire museum complex above the dig site just to protect what's underneath it. What they found was an army. Silent, still, buried and untouched for more than 2,000 years. When the first pit was cleared enough to see properly, it looked like a battlefield frozen mid-breath. Row after row of life-sized clay soldiers standing in perfect formation. Heads lifted. Armor sculpted in exact detail. All of them facing east, the direction of the rival kingdoms that China's first emperor had crushed during the 3rd century BC. Behind them stood clay horses that once pulled wooden war chariots. The wood had rotted away centuries ago. But the ruts in the floor still marked exactly where the wheels had rested. The scale was unreal. Nothing like this had ever been seen. Modern estimates put the total at more than 8,000 warriors, over 100 chariots, and hundreds of horses spread across several buried chambers. Only a fraction has been fully excavated. The largest chamber, Pit 1, stretches roughly 750 feet long and over 200 feet wide. More than 3.5 acres of underground space. Soldiers standing on a floor set 16 feet below the ancient ground surface. And Pit 1 is only the beginning. Pit 2 holds a combined arms formation, cavalry units with saddled horses, kneeling archers mid-draw, chariot crews ready for combat. Pit 3, smaller, contains only a few dozen officers and one chariot. Scholars believe it represents the command post, where senior commanders would have directed the forces in the larger chambers. Pit 4 was found empty. Construction stopped before it was ever filled. But in late 2024 and early 2025, archaeologists working in Pit 2 made a discovery that stunned even the veterans. A life-sized senior commander, standing near 2 chariots and several horses. His sculpted armor showed intricate layered patterns. A tall, ornate headdress marked his rank unmistakably. Chinese researchers confirmed that figures of such high status are extremely rare. Only about 10 top-tier commanders have been found across 50 years of excavation. The army keeps revealing itself, one soldier at a time. Here is what makes these figures truly impossible to explain away. No two faces are the same. Different jaw lines. Different cheekbones. Different ear shapes. Some faces look calm. Others look tense. Some noses are straight, others crooked. There are even faint lines pressed into lips that read like healed scars. For decades, historians assumed this was artistic variety. Sculptors adding small differences to make each figure feel individual. A creative choice, nothing more. Then the AI arrived. Research teams ran high-resolution 3-dimensional scans of hundreds of warrior heads. An AI model then compared thousands of tiny measurements across every face, ear angle, chin depth, eyelid fold. the subtle asymmetry of one cheekbone versus the other. It looked for patterns no human eye could track across that many faces simultaneously. What it found was not random variation. The facial asymmetry and ear geometry were so specific, so precise, so anatomically consistent within individual figures, that researchers concluded they could not have been invented from scratch. The AI's working theory, supported by senior researchers, is that at least some of the higher-ranking figures, especially officers, may have been modeled directly on real people. Actual men who served under the first emperor of China. But the AI discovery didn't stop at faces. It also identified how the warriors were built. Each figure stands between 5.5 and 6 feet tall and weighs several hundred pounds. They are hollow but strong. Legs shaped like thick clay tubes. Torsos built as separate shells. Arms, hands, and heads crafted individually, then joined while the clay was still damp. Artisans smoothed the seams, pressed fine detail into every surface, fingernails, belt knots, the stitching on armor plates, all carved by hand. The clay itself was engineered. Scientists analyzing samples identified a precise blend of local loess, a fine yellow silt common in northern China, mixed with quartz for strength and kaolin for smoothness. This wasn't ordinary soil scooped from the ground. It was a carefully controlled industrial mixture, prepared in centralized workshops, then distributed to production teams. This was not the work of one genius sculptor. This was a state-managed factory operation running in the 3rd century BC. Molds were used for base parts, hands, heads, basic forms. But once a molded piece came out, individual artists reworked every surface. Those hand-finished touches ensured the variation the AI later detected was real, intentional, and potentially tied to actual human faces. The production line created the army. The artists gave it its soul. When these soldiers were first buried, they were not gray. They were brilliant. Excavators who opened the pits in the 1970s saw colors still clinging to the clay surfaces. Deep reds from cinnabar. Vivid blues and purples from copper-based minerals. Pink on the cheeks. Black hairlines. Decorative patterns painted along the laces of armor. Among the pigments identified was Chinese purple, a synthetic barium copper silicate. An engineered compound. One of the earliest man-made purple pigments known anywhere in the world. The figures were first coated with lacquer, a natural resin drawn from the sap of the Asian lacquer tree. It dried into a shiny, glass-like seal, moisture-proof and smooth. Then the vivid colors were painted over it. The result, in antiquity, was spectacular. But for modern archaeologists, it was a disaster. Once exposed to open air, the ancient lacquer contracted almost instantly. Paint began flaking off, sometimes within 15 seconds of a figure being uncovered. Within minutes, entire layers of color crumbled away. Research teams watched helplessly as the colors vanished before they could stop it. Excavation had to be paused. Chemical stabilizers were developed and are now applied the moment any new surface is uncovered. The weapons found with the soldiers complete the image of a real fighting force. More than 40,000 bronze weapons recovered in total. Swords, spears, lances, halberds, dagger axes, crossbow mechanisms, and bundles of arrowheads packed in groups of about 100. Chemical analysis showed each bundle was internally consistent in composition but slightly different from the bundle beside it, suggesting separate workshops producing weapons to the same standard but from their own material sources. This wasn't decoration. This was a fully armed, fully equipped force, buried to fight in an afterlife that never came. So if this is the army, who are they guarding? At the center of the entire site stands a massive earthen pyramid. It looks peaceful from a distance. It looks terrifying once you understand what lies beneath it. The mound rises to about 249 feet, roughly the height of a 20-story building. Its base stretches for hundreds of feet in every direction. Work on the burial complex began when the emperor was still a teenager and continued for nearly 40 years, from around 246 BC to 208 BC. Historical accounts claim as many as 700,000 people, laborers, artisans, and prisoners, were forced to dig, haul, and construct the underground complex and the mound that sealed it. Mass graves found west of the mausoleum area have confirmed this. In one grave pit alone, over 100 skeletons were recovered. Young men, middle-aged men, their bones showing signs of extreme physical stress. Ancient DNA analysis revealed workers came from across the empire, not just local laborers, but people drawn from far northern regions and far southern regions. Some did not survive to leave. Modern scans have revealed what is inside. Not one room. A complete underground compound. A brick perimeter wall about 13 feet high. An outer shell of packed earth 30 to 40 yards thick encasing everything like armor. Sloping tunnels descending from every direction toward the center. And at the heart of it all, a main burial chamber approximately 260 feet long, 160 feet wide, and nearly 50 feet high. Its ceiling sits roughly 100 feet below today's ground surface. No one has ever opened it. The doorway into the core chamber has never been breached. Every piece of knowledge we have about the interior comes from ancient texts, ground-penetrating radar, and chemical analysis of the surrounding soil. The oldest account of the tomb comes from the historian Sima Qian, writing roughly 100 years after the emperor's death in 210 BC. He described an underground world of extraordinary scale. Full-scale palaces and towers, priceless treasures, rivers and seas formed from flowing liquid mercury, a ceiling painted with constellations, a floor mapped with the mountains and valleys of the empire, mechanical crossbows rigged to fire automatically at intruders, lamps burning indefinitely on the fat of creatures from the deep sea. For centuries, scholars debated whether any of it was real. Then modern science started confirming it. Soil tests around the mound have revealed mercury concentrations far above anything natural for the region. In some samples, the readings reached nearly 1,500 parts per billion. Later surveys found hotspots exceeding 1,200. For comparison, normal soil in that region measures in the low hundreds at most. Laser-based atmospheric sensors have detected mercury vapor leaking from the hill into the open air above it, measuring roughly 27 nanograms per cubic meter, against the regional average of 5 to 10. The mercury is not from modern industry. The pattern has been consistent across surveys taken decades apart. The strongest concentrations align precisely with where the burial chamber is expected to sit. Researchers believe the tomb may contain more than 100 metric tons of liquid mercury, over 200,000 pounds. Sourced from ancient cinnabar mines under imperial control and refined into pure liquid metal to fill the emperor's symbolic rivers and seas. Mercury was not just decoration in ancient China. Alchemists in royal circles believed it carried life-giving energy. They mixed it into potions meant to grant immortality. And here is the darkest irony of everything in this story. The emperor who was obsessed with living forever was slowly being poisoned by the very elixirs designed to save him. He died in 210 BC at approximately 49 years old, collapsing during one of his inspection tours. The mercury he consumed to escape death most likely accelerated it. The tomb remains sealed for reasons beyond respect. A chamber that has been closed for 2,000 years holds its own atmosphere, its own balance of air, moisture, and pressure. The moment it opens, oxygen floods in. Objects can collapse, fade, or disintegrate within seconds. Conservators have stated plainly that no technology currently exists to stabilize an interior that large at the exact moment of exposure. And that's before accounting for the traps. Before accounting for corridors designed to force intruders into narrow paths. Before accounting for structural beams that have been underground for over 2 millennia. Before accounting for groundwater that sits roughly 100 feet below the surface, ready to flood any uncontrolled excavation in minutes. The tomb has been built to outlast anyone who tries to enter it. To understand why a man would build something like this, you have to understand the man himself. In the 3rd century BC, what we now call China was not one country. It was 7 warring states locked in generations of violence. Cities burned. Alliances collapsed overnight. Assassins were routine. Into that chaos came a boy named Yingzheng. He became king of the state of Qin at 13 years old. By the time he was finished, he had done something no one in history had ever done before. He conquered every rival state. One after another. a chain of brutal wars ending in 221 BC. He dropped the old title of king and invented a new one, Huangdi, emperor. He declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. And he decided in that moment that there would be one throne, one system, one China. And it would be his. He standardized everything. One currency, one system of weights and measurements, one written script, one code of law. Cart axles were made uniform so every road could be used by every cart in the empire. Highways radiated outward from the capital like spokes on a wheel. Governors were appointed directly by the throne and dismissed for failure. Nobles no longer inherited power. Local warlords no longer existed. He also tried to erase the past. In 213 BC, his chancellor argued that historical texts and rival philosophies were dangerous, that they encouraged people to compare the present to a better past, and comparison could fuel rebellion. Books were ordered destroyed. Scholars who protested were executed. If there is only one official history, there is only one possible future. And for all this absolute power, over armies, over territory, over thought and language and memory, there was one thing he could not control. He became consumed by it. Court alchemists described islands across the eastern sea where immortal beings lived. He sent fleets to find them. One explorer, Su Fu, returned with excuses and stories of sea monsters and reclusive sages. He vanished on the second voyage and was never seen again. The emperor kept searching. He drank every mixture his alchemists prepared. Many of them contained mercury. He died at 49, poisoned by immortality. His dynasty collapsed within 4 years of his death. 15 years total from the moment he named himself first emperor to the final rebellion that ended everything. The shortest-lived great dynasty in Chinese history. But the structure he built, one emperor, one bureaucracy, one centralized authority, was inherited by every dynasty that followed. The Han, the Tang, the Ming, the Qing. For nearly 2,000 years, Chinese rulers followed his blueprint. His state's name, Qin, is where the Western word China comes from. That name outlasted his tomb, his dynasty, his army, and his empire. And somewhere beneath a quiet hill outside Xi'an, surrounded by rivers of mercury in a chamber no one has entered for over 2,000 years, the first emperor of China still waits. The army still stands in perfect formation, facing east, weapons in hand. Waiting for a command that will never come.